Abortion happens every day. Millions of people around the world will have an abortion each year. But the majority of those people will never talk about their abortion experiences. What if millions of people broke their silence and told the truth about their lives and their choices? This is Melissa Madera in New York City, and you are listening to the Abortion Diary podcast.
Hi, my name is Rachel Cook, and I'm going to tell you about the circumstances of my abortion. So it was a year ago, or more than that now, a year and a half ago, and I was 28 at the time, and there'd been this sounds silly, but like on April Fool's Day, virtually every year since I was like 16, like my April Fool's joke that my family was sick of hearing was like, oh, I'm pregnant. And so the great irony that year was that I actually found out that I was pregnant on April 1st. So when I told my sister about it, she was the first person I told. They didn't believe me. She thought I was kidding around. Yeah, I don't know. But in terms of how it happened and like how I felt about it, so, I mean, it was a guy I'd been dating, a guy I actually dated in high school, and then I started dating him again, I guess it was around Christmas so this was last April, and then I saw him again Christmas of, I guess, so what would that be, 2011? And, he's from my hometown in, like, the middle of nowhere, and he was the first guy I slept with, actually. And I had a complicated relationship with him, and I don't know, I just kind of thought, I thought that maybe it'd be fun to, I don't know, I didn't take the relationship, starting the relationship again very seriously. But he had always, I think, taken our relationship in whatever sort of incarnation it was in more seriously than I had. So he ended up coming to New York, and he kind of stayed with me and then kind of stayed with his dad who lived upstate. But it was just a few months, and I didn't see it going anywhere, and I think he wanted it to go somewhere. But also, I don't know, I think there were other underlying things. Like, I was still angry at him for things, like, from years ago. And, and we just weren't careful. And I knew that I didn't want to have a kid. Like, I recently realized that after this experience, I realized that I would want to have kids at some point in my life. But I am so skeptical of marriage, and just like, I think I don't believe in it. And I knew he wouldn't. I mean, he has a lot of issues that he's sort of like, I think, only beginning to start to work through. Anyway, so I found out I was pregnant, and I was sort of just like, this is going to sound probably strange and academic, but this is like everyone's experience is individual. But I was sort of like interested in just like what the experience of having an abortion would be like as a woman. And I don't think I feel any guilt. Like that maybe there is something underneath that I'm like not accessing. But when I found out, I think I was like 3.5 weeks along or something. And I scheduled the abortion for like the following Thursday or something. I found out on a Monday. And my 28th birthday was the next day, was Tuesday. So I found out Monday on April Fool's Day. My birthday was that Tuesday, and then I got the abortion, I think, that Thursday. But I didn't tell him about it. Like, we were kind of like parting ways, and he wasn't physically at my apartment or anything like that at that time. And I scheduled it, and I was reading up a lot online of just about like what my options were and so forth. And there was like, was it like a medical abortion? Like when you take the pill, like that was an option, obviously. And then also I read about, I guess it was like the aspiration method. And then just whatever D&Cs that are still done, like that horrifies me and makes me so angry that like women's healthcare is not prioritized enough that those aren't still happening, like D&Cs or whatever. And anyway, so I scheduled the aspiration procedure at this clinic in Manhattan, and went there. And I remember it was $1,100, and I had been broke for like a while, but had luckily or not luckily or whatever, just had a recent influx of money, so I could afford it then. But it infuriated me that like so many women would not have been able to access it because it was so crazy expensive for something that literally took 5 minutes to do, you know? But the woman at this clinic said that like if I'd chosen another type of procedure, they would have charged the same cost. I don't know what their thinking was behind that. But so I had the procedure. It literally, again, took 5 minutes. It was like mildly just uncomfortable. I was 4 weeks along, so I think part of like not feeling guilty is, I don't know how I would have felt if I was like further along, but literally at that time, and this is in no way condemning anyone else's decision, like everyone has to do what's right for them. But I think in part, if I'm honest, that knowing that it was like an invisible whatever, like made it not feel guilty or contributed to not feeling guilty. So yeah, it was uncomfortable and there was a little bit of bleeding, and then I talked to her afterward, and I remember just being infuriated because, so this woman, she said that she'd gotten this training in like the 70s and she was one of the first people in the States to get it, and now they use it in like the developing world and places like Kenya, and it's so much safer and just like more comfortable for like the woman getting the abortion. And she was like, yeah, but I guess the Buffett Foundation had provided funding for it in the States before, and then they stopped because abortion is so stupidly like made controversial in the States. So if I hadn't been in New York and hadn't been of the financial whatever, like if I didn't have the means to pay for it, well, first of all, if I hadn't been in New York, I probably wouldn't even have had access to that option whatsoever, which is just like so awful and not okay. And then again, because it was so expensive, if I hadn't had the money for it, like I had access to a simple procedure that every woman should have access to, and they don't, because of politics and other ridiculous, like infuriating aspects of our culture that like come together to not prioritize women's health. So I was just like really upset to learn that. And I thought about, and I talked with you about this before, like how that would be a great topic for a documentary. So I'm happy to know that a documentary on that topic is being made in addition to like your awesome podcast. So yeah, that was the experience with like that actual procedure. And I just went home and like that was that. I don't know. He was also really angry at me when I told him about it. He called me a murderer. Like multiple times, but he's kind of I don't know, in my mind I've like relegated him to this place where he's like kind of a ridiculous character, so like it wasn't as hurtful as it would have been coming from someone else. But it was also just like, I also know that like he doesn't know what the procedure is actually like. He knew how far along I was, I think I told him, but yeah, it was another function of like ignorance, like not actually knowing what goes on, and a lack of empathy, not thinking about what it's like if you're somebody who's in that position. So that further confirmed that I made the right decision, that he had a reaction like that. I think it's so important that we talk about this and don't, like, the amount of, I think I was, quote, lucky in that, I mean, my parents are religious. I was brought up in like I guess it was the equivalent of like an evangelical Christian household. And, my mom was like really upset when she found out I was like having sex at 16 or whatever, like livid. And I remember my dad said that he didn't tell me this directly. He told me this through my mom, but if I got pregnant, like he wouldn't pay for college. But also at the same time, I don't know, like where I grew up was like this diluted Catholicism that kind of manifested itself in that people were anti-abortion without thinking. They're also homophobic, I'd say. This is generalizing, obviously. But it was kind of just like, that sort of permeated the culture, but there wasn't, not only in sort of like under the category of religion, but just broadly, I would say that people didn't often sort of think about why they held the beliefs that they held. But yeah, my brother actually, I think he'd be okay with me sharing this. His girlfriend had an abortion a few years before And it only came out sort of later, and my parents were, I guess, upset about it. I know when his girlfriend had the abortion, it was like a D&C, and it sounded awful when there was like suction and just like, I don't know. It just, the fact that people think that it's not talked about enough such that women even know that there are other options, or that, I don't know, I just see too many women making this decision by themselves or feeling that they have to make it by themselves. They can't share it with anybody, and then they can't talk about it afterward. And it just like means there's so much pain being carried around, and it's just like bullshit. Like it doesn't have to be that way. So I'd love to be able to contribute to it no longer being that way if I can, in my own small way. How has it shaped my life since? I mean, it probably most starkly in that it made me think more about how damaging it is when something isn't talked about and when it's made taboo. And I definitely self-identify as a feminist, and I think every thinking person is a feminist, because by definition it just means like you want women to have the same rights and opportunities that men have. But for some reason that word has been like also made taboo, which is strange to me. So since I made the choice to have an abortion, I think it's affected my life largely in just sort of like galvanizing my belief in the importance of helping women and helping them to help themselves in sort of like an even broader sense. Like before, I'd kind of focus more on, I guess, helping them economically or teaching them how to help themselves economically. But yeah, it's a health issue, and it's a human, like, it's not women's rights, it's like human rights. And I think, I don't know, this is like gonna maybe sound kind of esoteric, but I've been thinking a lot about how everyone has blind spots, and because this isn't talked about, like, it allows some blind spots that maybe men are more likely to have it allows them to kind of continue being oblivious. And we just need to talk about this. That's, I guess, the biggest revelation I had as a result of this experience. I was very aware of how lucky I was to have happened to have been in Manhattan when this happened, and to have had the means to pay for the aspiration procedure that should be available to everyone at virtually no cost, because it's so simple and it's like a plastic apparatus. So just thinking about how many women don't have access to that, just like, it breaks my heart, and it's not okay. And this would be so simple and easy to change, and I think having a discourse about this is one of the early steps we need to take. Yeah, I don't know. And I guess I'd want to say that I guess to my mind, before I had an abortion, if I even really thought about this at all, which I didn't devote a lot of thought to this, but I guess I sort of assumed that women who had abortions would feel some guilt or wouldn't. I don't know. I guess I feel like my experience was different than I would have guessed that it would have been before. It was just like my big takeaway, honestly, and I feel like society would like say that I'm being callous for feeling this way or something, but my takeaway was really like, this is not a big deal. Like, this procedure was not a big deal at all. Again, it like took 5 minutes and it was mildly uncomfortable. I just thought like this should not be like made into this huge issue.
For more information about the Abortion Diary podcast, visit us on the web at theabortiondiary.com or email us at info@theabortiondiary.com.